Hi, I'm Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters Omaha, and tonight we have actually it's a nymph or wet fly and a streamer. Uh, they were both designed for trout, but they would definitely work for a lot of the warm water species that we have around here. Um, before we get into those, first fly we'll do tonight. Let's see. Is called the Doc Spratley, and it was actually created by Dick Prankard um, in 1949. And the story is that he was just finishing the fly, and um, Dr. Donald Spratley of Mount Vernon, Washington, walked into the store and asked him what the name of the fly was, and he just he had just created it, so he said it's called the Doc Spratley. So named it after that doctor. Um, it's shown here, and it's probably most often tied in about at least a 2x long hook. I think originally it says 9671 or 9672. It was a standard nymph hook. Um, and it was originally designed really to be a diving caddis. Um, it's probably fished more often in a longer profile like this as maybe a small bait fish, dragonfly nymph, any of the larger nymphs. A little bit smaller sizes, it could be a damsel nymph. Um, but it was very productive fly, very popular in Pacific Northwest. Uh, a lot of people in British Columbia were real fond of this, mostly for still water. Um, but again, it could be used anywhere. I really like the looks of it because it uses guinea fowl feathers for the tail and the beard. And it uses pheasant tail fibers for the wing, which it's not the strongest material in the world. Um, so, if you're using this for panfish or something like that, you might get through about 4 or 5 before the wing starts to kind of shred up. Um, and the head it's kind of a bulky head of peacock herl. So, interesting fly from the late 1940s. And that's where we're going to go with it. So for the materials, um, we'll start off with, of course, the tail is probably the first thing you tie in. I have a package of guinea feathers, spotted like this, um, but you just use several of the fibers for the tail and then also for the beard. The body is a black dubbing. I'm going to use this Touchatron. It has some real nice flashy antron in there. The ribbing is silver oval tinsel. And then I'm going to actually, I kind of like the looks of it with a little bit of a red butt. So I'm going to do that first, but I'll finish it with black thread. Um, Peacock herl for the head. And so for the wing, um, if you have these really nice long fibered tails like this, this is one of Klumper's clumps. tail clumps that I got. It's real long, and I just didn't want to use this to, um, you're using half of that for the wing. This is best used for um, wrapping bodies and stuff like that, where you need real long, good length. But I have an older one that has a little bit shorter fiber, so that's what I'm going to use for the wing. So for a hook, I'm using this is a nymph hook. I don't know the exact make and model. But again, I'm going to start it with a little bit of red thread and just mostly toward the back here because I just really want to lay down um, the red butt. So I'll get that thread secured. Now, normally I would do this and then hit it with some UV resin um, just to make it nice and strong. But now I'm going to spin my thread counterclockwise as if I was looking down on it, just to flatten the thread as I'm wrapping it. And that'll give me a little bit smoother of a butt there. Spin it again. And I think that'll be good. And I'll just go ahead and whip finish it back here. Get it with a little UV resin. And just kind of move that around just to protect it. And I'll work it up into the part that'll be covered up a little bit. And then hit it with the UV light. The original didn't have this, but this fly is tied in a red color, green, um, yellow, and black, I think are the main colors. So I'm using for the red as well, 140 denier. I want to make sure I leave enough room for the head. So I'm going to come back about at least 2 full eye lengths back and use that thread just to mark my stopping point. And then on my way down, I'm going to take that. Well, first we'll do the guinea for the tail. So I want a pretty good chunk here. This is almost not quite a half an inch. And then about a half a hook shank in length. So really I'll just basically tie that down. where the thread is. Take a couple wraps and then double check. That should be about right. So just tie that down on the top of the hook shank. Right back there. And then on the way up, then I'm going to tie in this silver oval tinsel. I want this to be on the far side of the hook shank so I don't foul the tail when I wrap it. And since I'm using dubbing for the body, I don't have to worry about a perfectly smooth body. So let me flip this out of the way so it doesn't get in my way. So I'm going to take some of this dubbing, and you can see this Touchatron in black is nice black soft fibers with some Antron mixed in there, just to give it a little bit of flash. So I'm going to start back here and turn the point of the hook away from me. And then I'm just going to take small amounts. Twist them onto the thread. And I'm probably going to have to do a few rounds of dubbing here to cover the body. So I'll do a couple inches of dubbing noodle there and then work back to the tail and start moving forward. You can use, if you have a black like yarn, wool yarn, I think this was originally tied with wool. You can use any dubbing. If you have a smaller black chenille, that would work as well. Whoops. And it's probably far enough. And then I'll come through with the ribbing. And usually get about maybe 4 wraps. We'll tie that down nice and secure. Cut it with the back of my scissors because that Mylar can kind of dull your tips. Okay. Now we'll go to that pheasant tail. And I want to get, I was going to say 9 or 5, but I like the wing to have a little bit of, maybe closer to 12 to 15 of these fibers. And then pull it away. And then line that up about halfway down the tail. Leaning it a little bit towards me just to make sure it doesn't wrap around. The thread torque will bring it right on top. Tie that down with some nice tight wraps. And then for the beard, come back to my guinea feather. Take maybe a little bit more for the beard. Bunch those up. Now, if you had a smaller feather, you could wrap it and wrap it as a soft hackle, or wrap it and then gather it underneath. I think I've done that recently for a beard, but I want it to be just kind of a little bit past the point there for that beard. So I'm marking it with my fingers. I'm going to go ahead and cut that over the waist bin. And then tie it in on the bottom of the hook. And then I'll make sure I have kind of a smooth area here for wrapping that peacock herl. For the front, I'm just going to use 2 herls. For the head, I'm going to cut the tips so they're even. Then I'll just take those herls. Now, actually, if you want to make it look nice, you can just wrap them forward like that. And I've done it before in the past where I twisted it around the thread. There's different ways to make the peacock herls smooth. Not smooth, I mean strong. Couple wraps over it, sweep it back, and form a small head. And whip finish. Cut the thread. I will often break those herls, but sometimes it doesn't work, so the time for it not to work wouldn't be best to be during a Zoom call. So there's a Doc Spratley with a little red butt there. Again, for that body, it could be red. It's kind of a popular color for the body, or green. Any questions on that? The next one.
Nice looking fly.
Thank you. This is a real sparse version. It's a streamer called the Gierach Special. It was, of course, John Gierach, the author. He mentioned it in the book Trout Bum, 1988 book. I don't have that yet, but that's on my list. He first called it the gray squirrel streamer, and he very first tied it on a short shank hook and used it for rock bass and bluegill. But then he tied this longer version to use for trout. As other people started fishing it, they named it the Gierach Special. I heard one guy say that it was actually John was fishing with like a nephew or something like that, and he asked for another fly, and he said, "Can you give me one of those Gierach Specials?" And that's where it um, got the name. But um, I haven't done a painted on eye before. It was a pretty common thing in some of the older streamers. Uh, go to the pattern here. Um, 3X or 4X long streamer hook is the way it's most often tied now. Um, I like to start with white thread just for the body material that I'm using. Um, and the it has a longer kind of like the throat on the last fly, but it's bucktail and it's more of an underbelly. It's a little bit longer of a kind of a sweeping underbelly. Mimics the lighter color on the bottom of a bait fish. And then the wing is gray squirrel tail with a little bit of pearl crystal flash, and then a peacock herl topping. And then the head is red with eyes painted on. So let me get this out of the way so I don't lose it. And switch to materials. So we'll use this peacock. The wing is squirrel tail. A little bit of pearl crystal flash. You could probably put any color of flash in it that you want. For the body, I'm going to use Mirage Tinsel. It seems as though he used a sort of a braided, I think, uh, like a maybe something like this. This is a from a craft store, like a braided pearl mylar. I think he used something like that. There's a few different ways to make the body, but I think it looks really nice with that Mirage Tinsel. I'll use white thread underneath just so it doesn't show through. And really, I think that's about it for materials. Um, for when you select the pearls to go over the top of it, like on this side of this particular feather, I've got some broken ones. You just want to make sure the tips are intact. There's a couple broken ones up here. Um, so just more on this side, looks like it's in better shape where the tips come to a point. And of course, the fish aren't going to care. But if you want to make it look nice, just make sure the tips look natural. So I have a 3X long hook in the vise. There we go. Again, I'm going to start with a white thread. This doesn't have a tail. I suppose you could kind of do like I did last time and put a little red bud on there. Maybe put a silver or gold little bud on there just to kind of give it a little bit of flash there. But the original didn't have that. Whoop. I was just going to say I'm using this tag end of thread to hold tight so I have control of where those wraps go, and then I lost control. And that should be good. I do want a flat body on here, so I'm going to spin it counterclockwise. And I'm going to tie in my Mirage tinsel. I just have a piece of it here that I took off ahead of time. This Mylar tinsel doesn't have much bulk, so you don't really have to worry about causing a bump by tying it in. So I'm just going to tie it in right there at the end of the shank and then wrap forward, touching turns. Now, if you'll notice, as I'm making these wraps, um, I don't make a bunch of wraps until it gets short and then pull and make a bunch of wraps and then pull. It's best if you can adjust the tension of your bobbin to where I'm going to try to zoom out. I don't think I can really show you what I'm doing, but you can cup. Let me start wrapping backwards a little bit here so I can show you with a shorter. You can cup the spool with your fingers like this to give it more tension when you need it to be. But if you have that tension set so that it'll be tight, you can make it tight, but it will slip through to the point where you don't have to keep stretching it out. If you can keep even pressure on your wraps as you go around, if you look at the way the hook is bending, it's bending the same way up, down, left, and right. So I have the same tension on all sides. See a lot of people make flips like that and everything. And when you do that, it tends to make your wraps uneven. If you can just get in the habit of making steady wraps like that, it'll make your flies turn out a lot better. Another thing is you want to keep, this is my opinion, okay? You want to keep your thread at least about an inch, maybe to an inch and a half in length. A lot of people get real short, and I'm going to try to do it here. You get real short with their bobbin, and sure, especially around the point here, sometimes it's easier to maneuver it, but there's a lot of danger with that hook point and a ceramic tip or even a metal tip. If you start doing this and you end up with the point of the hook scratching the tip of your bobbin, you're going to have to get a new bobbin. So that's just my public service announcement, is try to keep it to where it's a little harder to maneuver it around the hook point, by moving it out like this. But you can cause a lot of damage to the tip of your bobbin if you get it scratched with that hook point. So I'm going back up. I'm just smoothing this out with flat wraps, spinning it every few wraps so the thread is flat. And I'm zoomed out quite a ways. Hopefully you can see that thread. When I spin it, you can see where the thread meets that hook shank. It's flatter than every time you make a wrap, you impart a twist in it. And so if you spin it like that, you'll end up with flatter thread. And that's probably far enough. I'll go ahead and finish that white thread. And because I want the head to be red, I'll start a red thread on here. Same thread, 140 denier. Danville's flat or UTC ultra thread. They'll spin up and get nice and flat. So now I'm going to take that Mirage tinsel and I'm going to try to do touching wraps. If you overlap your wraps, you can make it'll look nice. But as you get up the shank a little ways, um, it starts to lift up because you're doing it at an angle. If you can just do your wraps to where they touch, just barely touch the wrap before them, you can get a nice smooth body like that. About 3 wraps should hold it enough. Reach around all the lights and cameras. All right. So this time I'm going to do the throat first. So I'm going to take some white bucktail. Try not to get any brown in it. You want this to be fairly sparse, but you do want it to show up. So I'm going to grab some bucktail and then I'm going to grab it out here. First, I just want to clean the real short stuff out of here. So I'll do that off the screen. Now, this doesn't have some real long ones, but I can kind of hand stack it a little bit here. Pull those longer ones and even them up. You can stack this if you want, but I think especially with this underbelly, it looks nice if it has kind of a natural taper. And then I'm just going to pull, there's some shorter ones in there that are kind of broken. And maybe even pull a few of those out like that. That should be pretty good. So I want just probably just like most of the hairs are shorter than the bend of the hook. Just a few of them would extend past. So I'm just going to mark that point and cut it. Tie that in underneath. Nice tight wraps. Right there. Now, this point right here is where the back of the head is where I want the back of the head. So when I tie the squirrel tail in for the top, I want to make sure that all of that lines up. So I'm going to take, again, I don't really want to stack this, but it's almost stacked if you pull it out 90 degrees from the tail. I'm going to do this a little bit more dense than the last one was pretty sparse. Do a little bit thicker of a wing there. Got that loose. Tips are pretty well aligned. I'm going to come up here in this top section and then just clean out all this shorter fur from the bottom. About a hook gap past the bend of the hook is where I like to have this kind of a streamer. So I'll mark, I'll be a little bit longer there. mark it there with my fingers, and then I'm going to cut that. And then I'll tie it in here. Now, again, if you spin it counterclockwise, not so much to flatten the thread, but it makes the thread jump back toward your fingers. So it's easier to grab that material. And I want real tight wraps, come in front and build up sort of a cone shape, and come back up on that squirrel tail. Just real tight, tie that stuff down. Now, for the peacock herl, I've got 4 here that I already took off. And sometimes they'll be kind of pointing in different directions because they have a little bit of a natural curve to them. If you just kind of grab them by the tips and just kind of move them around a little bit, you'll get it to where that curve kind of flows together. About like that. And then I'll lay that right on top. Let's see how that looks. Again, just watch the back of the head there to make sure everything lines up properly. And I can go ahead and cut the butts out of there. And then now I just want to clean that head up. Sometimes you can kind of push some of that herl out of the way, break it off. You're going to paint an eye on here, so don't worry about it being too big of a head. You just don't want to really crowd the hook eye. Now again, I'll spin it counterclockwise, flatten the thread some. Make that a little more smooth. And then whip finish. Now the fun part. So there's this fancy tool that costs 50 bucks called a toothpick. And what you want to do is leave the tip. You can kind of maybe bang it a little bit if you want to make it more more blunt. That would be for the pupil, for the black part. And then for the white part, if you carefully break it in half, then again, just kind of bang it on the pedestal of my vise just to kind of get it flat. That's bigger for the for the white part. So this is just acrylic paint. You can use pretty much any paint you want and just cover it with UV resin or several coats of head cement. I'm just going to put a drip on a sticky pad of white and stick that bigger part of the toothpick on there. Kind of a big eye. I'm holding my hand so it doesn't shake, just to try to get a steadier. So that's a little better looking eye. That's a little bit too big. and then kind of wipe that off. Now, if I was to try to put the black on there, sometimes it works perfect, but sometimes it starts to kind of bleed and blend and everything. So I had enough forethought to tie one the other day and let that dry. So then we could finish it up with the black. So again, just put a drop of the black on the sticky pad and then use the smaller part. Again, steadying my hand and dot a pupil on there. If it doesn't work out, you could always put a little bit more white over that when it dries, and if you want it to be bigger or smaller or whatever, can't make it smaller. But that's the best way to put those eyes on. Let that dry completely, and then you can cover it with several coats of head cement, or again, UV resin would be a good way to just kind of cover that up. Excellent. I'll bet that would be an excellent crappie fly, which is always, this time of year is what I've got on my brain. Uh, but um, excellent trout streamer.
Mike, is that natural grave squirrel?
Gray squirrel, yes.
Okay. I suppose you could probably
Um,
use fox too, couldn't you?
you could you
Fox
could
squirrel.
use I found that I can't reach it because of my waste bin. When I was doing those flies a while back with badger, um, badger fur almost has the same markings, but it's real soft. Um, if you have trouble with squirrel tail, normally it's because it gets pulled on a little bit, and once a few of those hairs come out of the middle, you've lost all the tension on that hair. That's why you don't want to put too much on there. If you put too big of a gob of squirrel tail, it doesn't compress. It's very hard hair, very slippery. And if you get any of those hairs start to pull out of the middle, then all of a sudden that bundle is looser and the rest of it's all going to come out. I had a fly I let somebody, I tied on for somebody at Halleck Park when we were um, fishing out there a couple weekends ago. And he said, the wing is gone on my fly. I said, yep, I know exactly what happened. That was a squirrel tail wing. Um, but badger is real soft and that will compress and it'll move more in the water. Um, but a lot of these flies, bucktail flies and stuff like that, they did use a lot of squirrel tail. And yeah, John, I agree. A little bit different color to use the red squirrel.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, Mike,
we have around here. Yeah.
can you use Google Eyes?
You could, I guess it'd be depend on the size um of the fly you're tying. Um the like these stick-on eyes and stuff like that's pretty small for what you can get for Google Eyes and everything else.
There's the
And
other
those
type.
that'd be way too big for the size of that head. But if you were doing this on maybe a four or a two, and you just make it a point to make that red head a little bit bigger, you could probably put a smaller stick on or Google artificial eye.
Yeah.
I think it's just kind of cool to paint the eyes on like they did in the olden days.
I've got when I was making balsa wood poppers, I built a bunch of stamps that I made out of different size nails that I used for the eyes. So I
That'd be
could
good
put
too.
different size circles on the make them look like a frog.
Right. I did it same thing with cork bass bugs, um, using finish nails. So a bigger finish nail to put the bigger
Yeah.
spot, and then a smaller
Yeah.
one to make the
Yeah.
But for this size of hook anyway, this is I believe this is a size 6. You could make, like I said, you could make that head a little bulkier, um, to get a bigger eye on there. I think this one, I think the eye looks better on this one, maybe. It's about the same. Um, but yeah, the bigger the hook, the bigger the eye, the head you can put on there, and then bigger you can paint those eyes.